you are being watched right now. I mean, that thought just crossed your mind, didn't it?
It is an incredibly unsettling feeling, but it's something almost every single person walking the earth experiences daily.
Right. It's that creeping, just persistent suspicion that the people around you are paying close attention to exactly what you're doing, like how you're sitting or what you're wearing.
Or how you pronounced that word a second ago.
Yes, exactly. So today, our mission on this deep dive is to explore exactly why our brains are so utterly convinced that everyone is judging our every move. And more importantly, we want to look at some real stories to learn how to actually quiet that inner audience for good.
I love that. But, before we even get into the mechanics of this, I think we need to validate something right out of the gate.
Okay, what's that?
Well, if you have ever stood in the shower on a Tuesday morning, just agonizing as you replay some incredibly awkward moment from 3 days ago.
Oh man, guilty.
Right. Or if you've ever completely avoided a specific coffee shop just because you spilled a latte there once and you're convinced the baristas remember you as the spill person.
Yeah, you just map out a whole new route to work to avoid them.
Exactly. If you do that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with your mind.
That is a massive relief because when you are stuck in that mental loop, it genuinely feels like a personal flaw. You feel like you're just, I don't know, neurotic or overly anxious compared to everyone else.
It definitely feels that way, but it's not a flaw. What people are experiencing is a universal, very well-documented pattern. It is an illusion, yes, but it's an illusion created by the fundamental way human thinking is wired.
So it's baked into us.
It really is. It's a specific mental habit known as the spotlight effect. It's this deeply human tendency to believe that other people are noticing and remembering your appearance, your mistakes, your awkward moments, far, far more than they actually are.
So like when I trip on the sidewalk, my brain essentially tricks me into thinking the entire street stopped, pulled up chairs, and just started taking notes on my clumsiness.
That is a perfect way to visualize it.
Mm.
Inside the mind, something very specific happens the moment a person feels vulnerable or exposed.
What happens?
The brain suddenly shifts almost all of its attention inward. You become acutely aware of your own face flushing, the pitch of your own voice, the exact physical sensation of stumbling.
Right, it feels huge to me.
Exactly. And because that inward feeling is so intensely loud for you, your brain makes a quiet but massive leap in logic. It just assumes that everyone else in the vicinity must be experiencing that exact same intensity while looking at you.
Wow.
Yeah, it's what's referred to as an anchoring and adjustment problem.
Okay, wait. Anchoring and adjustment. I think I've heard of anchoring in behavioral economics. Like, when a car dealer throws out a crazy high initial price to make their next offer look like a great deal. Is it the same mechanism here?
That is a brilliant connection, and yes, it is the exact same mechanism.
Oh, cool.
When you buy a car, the dealer anchors you with a high initial price, making everything else seem reasonable. Well, your brain does the exact same thing with anxiety. It anchors on your massive internal panic.
So my panic is the high price.
Right. Let's say you trip, and internally that feels like a level 10 crisis. You are mentally anchored at a 10. When you try to gauge how much other people care, your brain tries to adjust, but it only adjusts down slightly, maybe to an 8.
But the reality of the room is a level 0. People are simply not paying attention to me.
Exactly. The adjustment is never enough to meet reality. And the reason for this is what is described as an egocentric bias.
Meaning we think everything is about us.
Sort of, yeah. Human attention naturally centers on the self as the default reference point. You hear your own thoughts, you feel your own physical body all day. Nobody else has that access to you.
Right, I'm the only one in my head.
So your brain just defaults to assuming that if something feels huge internally, it must be highly visible externally.
I hear what you're saying about this being a bias, but part of me thinks, well, maybe this is just being a considerate person. I mean, if I don't care how I'm perceived, aren't I just going to act like a jerk?
That's a really common fear.
Right. Isn't a heavy dose of self-awareness a good thing for society?
Well, that is the most insidious part of the spotlight effect. It disguises itself as social intelligence.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it feels protective. You think you're just reading the room or being polite.
Hmm.
But true self-awareness is about accurately perceiving your impact on others. The spotlight effect does the complete opposite. It demands a hidden tax on your behavior.
What kind of tax? What do you mean by that?
It leads to subtle behavioral shifts that actually disconnect people from others,
Like what?
like a slight avoidance of eye contact because someone thinks they stumbled in a conversation, or choosing safe, invisible clothing every single day so nobody looks twice at them.
Oh, wow.
Or think about the mental energy spent rehearsing simple conversations before they even happen, just in case someone remembers the last time they were awkward.
Yeah, just constantly running a script in your head. So instead of accurately reading the room, I'm just reading my own internal anxiety and projecting it onto everyone else.
Yes, and that means you are no longer accurately reading the room at all. You are performing for an audience that isn't actually there, which completely distracts you from the real people in front of you.
That makes so much sense. So we have this massive internal distortion, but I want to know what happens when we actually measure it.
hmm
Like, how big is the gap between what we think people notice and what they are actually seeing?
To see that gap, there was this fascinating moment years ago where they tested this at Cornell University. This is actually where the spotlight effect formally got its name.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they asked university students to put on an embarrassing t-shirt, specifically one featuring a highly uncool musician at the time.
Oh, no.
And then they had them just walk into a room full of their peers.
Okay, just walking into a room of judgmental college students wearing something intentionally embarrassing, that is concentrated social nightmare fuel. I would be sweating immediately.
I think most people would. But before going in, they asked the participants wearing the shirt to estimate how many people in the room would notice and remember what they were wearing.
And what did they guess?
The participants predicted that rawly half the room would notice the embarrassing shirt.
Which feels entirely logical when you are the one wearing it. You feel like a walking billboard. You're hyper aware of the fabric, the logo, the fit. It feels impossible to miss.
But the actual numbers told a completely different story. The number of people who recalled the shirt afterward was dramatically lower.
Like how low?
It was less than a quarter of the wearer's estimate. And in many versions of this, the number of people who noticed was almost zero.
Less than a quarter. So we aren't just a little bit off. We are overestimating our visibility by 2 to 3 times the reality. But to understand why we can't just turn this illusion off once we realize it's happening, we have to look at what's physically happening inside the brain, right?
Which is what they did at Harvard.
Yes, they looked at how this self-focused attention connects to social anxiety using brain imaging. And they found that people with heightened social anxiety experience an amplified version of the spotlight effect.
So it's even worse for them.
Much worse. The imagined audience in their minds grows even larger and much more critical. And looking at the brain shows that this inward shift of attention is tied to heightened activity in regions built for self-monitoring.
So the parts of your brain dedicated to thinking about yourself are just firing constantly.
That's right. The brain is physically working overtime. It is burning valuable fuel to monitor the self, rather than burning that fuel to accurately perceive the external world. The biological machinery is just heavily biased toward self-monitoring.
Man, if our biological machinery is literally lighting up to monitor ourselves, does just knowing this actually do anything?
What do you mean? Well, if it's a structural brain response, aren't we just stuck being hypervigilant forever? I mean, can we even change it?
You would think we're stuck, but this is perhaps the most encouraging part of all this. Looking at data from places like the American Psychological Association, simply learning that the spotlight effect exists measurably decreases social anxiety.
Wait, really? Just having the vocabulary for it physically changes the brain's response.
It does. When people are told in advance about this phenomenon, their anxiety around minor social mistakes drops. This tells us something profound.
Which is?
A meaningful portion of our social discomfort isn't about the mistake itself.
It's the belief about the mistake. It's the catastrophic story we tell ourselves about how glaringly obvious our error was to the rest of the world.
Yes, the pain is fueled by the false belief of how visible the error truly is. Once that belief loosens, once a person realizes that statistically nobody is paying attention, the emotional charge loosens right along with it.
Okay, so awareness is our first line of defense. But knowing how the brain works is one thing. Navigating our actual daily lives is another. We don't live in a vacuum. We have stress, we have habits, we have smartphones.
Right.
What are the practical things in our day-to-day lives that are secretly turning the spotlight's brightness up or down?
Well, lifestyle factors play a massive, quiet role in feeding this illusion. And sleep is the foundational one. Lack of sleep significantly reduces the brain's capacity for accurate social judgment.
So when I'm exhausted, I literally lose the ability to accurately gauge what other people are thinking.
Yes, the baseline reality check is compromised. A tired mind is much more likely to overestimate how much others are noticing because it simply lacks the energy to objectively evaluate the room.
Wow.
Then imagine someone tries to fix that exhaustion with caffeine. High caffeine intake, especially late in the day, spikes physiological anxiety. And anxiety is the exact fuel that makes the spotlight effect burn brighter.
It's a vicious cycle. But on the flip side, we can also use our habits to turn the brightness down, right? Because I saw mention of nature and walking as antidotes.
Yeah, regular movement, even just a short walk, lowers stress hormone levels enough to soften that inward hyperfocus.
Mm.
Similarly, time spent in nature has been connected to reduced rumination.
Now, rumination, let's make sure we are clear on that. Rumination is like a camera's autofocus getting stuck on the foreground, right?
Mm-hmm.
No matter how much is happening in the background of the room, your brain keeps aggressively blurring it out to keep the lens locked on your own mistake.
That is a fantastic analogy. Rumination is what keeps the spotlight effect running in the mind for days or weeks after the original moment has actually passed.
It's just relentless.
It's that mental loop.
Yeah.
Getting out into nature or taking a walk forces that camera lens to refocus on the wider environment. It breaks the autofocus.
So sleep, caffeine, nature, these are the biological dials. But we have to talk about the cultural dial.
Absolutely.
If our brains are already wired to overestimate how much people are watching us, social media must just send this into absolute overdrive.
It definitely does. We live in a culture built around constant visibility. Every platform is engineered around the idea that people are watching, counting, and judging your likes, views, and comments.
So if I'm doom scrolling on social media after a terrible night of sleep, fueled by a massive late-day coffee, I am basically building a massive stadium for my inner audience to judge me.
That is exactly what you're doing. You are feeding your brain a steady stream of confirmation for a bias that was already there.
Yikes.
And we see a direct correlation between heavy social media use and heightened self-consciousness in daily offline interactions. The comparison trap on social media is intimately tied to the spotlight effect.
How so?
Both rely on the exact same exaggerated belief that people are paying far more attention to you than they actually are.
We train our brains online to expect a massive audience, and then we carry that heavy expectation right into the grocery store or the office meeting. That makes so much sense.
It's completely connected.
Now, I want to challenge an assumption here, because it's incredibly easy to assume that this is just a phase. You figure if you just get a little older, or you gain a bit more authority at work, or you just try really hard to not care, this whole phenomenon will naturally vanish.
That is a widely held assumption. But the reality proves it entirely wrong. In fact, this leads us to a surprising twist.
What is it?
The spotlight effect often gets stronger right after a person achieves a genuine success.
Wait, okay, let's unpack this. You're saying that winning the award or getting the promotion actually makes you more paranoid about tripping over a word in a meeting. That feels entirely backward.
I know it sounds backward, but it's a dynamic known as heightened evaluative concern.
Heightened evaluative concern simply means that achievement raises the stakes in your own mind. You feel you now have a target on your back.
Exactly. Think about the last time you got a promotion or a big win at work, or even just received a really nice compliment on a project.
Okay, yeah.
Did you certainly spend 20 minutes agonizing over a simple email to your team later that afternoon because you felt like you had a new reputation to protect?
Oh, definitely. I reread the email like 5 times.
That is heightened evaluative concern. Instead of relaxing into your success, you paradoxically increase your self-monitoring. You imagine the audience has gotten bigger because of your new title.
So the higher you climb, the brighter the imaginary spotlight gets. High visibility roles intensify the bias, which completely busts the myth that confident, successful people don't experience this.
They absolutely do. And sometimes it hits them the hardest.
Wow.
Another myth is the idea of forced indifference. You hear that advice all the time, right? Just stop caring what people think.
Yeah, people say that constantly.
But trying to forcibly suppress a natural human instinct backfires. Trying not to think about a pink elephant ensures you will only think about a pink elephant.
Right.
Awareness and gentle retraining of the brain work far better than trying to shame yourself into not caring.
And just to be totally clear, this isn't just a young person's problem, right?
Right.
The focus just shifts. In your 20s, the spotlight might be glued to your physical appearance, but by your 40s, the spotlight has moved over to your professional competence or your parenting. But the mechanism remains identical.
Exactly. The human brain doesn't outgrow the bias. It just finds new things to worry about.
Which brings us to the most practical part of this deep dive.
Mhm.
We know the mechanisms, we know the biological and digital triggers, we know that simply telling ourselves not to care doesn't work.
Right.
So how do we practically, methodically rewire our brains to shrink this imaginary audience? I know we have an 8-step practical guide to go through, and I want us to really take our time unpacking these using some real-life stories.
These steps are incredibly powerful because they move from passive awareness to active daily habit building. They interrupt the mechanism.
Let's start with Michael. Michael is a 44-year-old construction supervisor. He manages a crew of 12. During a safety briefing, he completely stumbled over his words. And he became convinced his crew had lost respect for him, to the point where he started staying up late, exhausting himself by rehearsing every future briefing word for word. This seasoned construction supervisor is losing sleep over a verbal stumble.
It beautifully illustrates how universal this is. It doesn't matter what industry you're in or how tough you are. Michael's turning point came when he started using 2 specific tools. First, the 2-minute rule.
The 2-minute rule.
Yes, the intense emotional reaction from an awkward moment, that hot flush of embarrassment, peaks within 2 minutes and then naturally fades if you don't feed it.
But not feeding it is the hardest part. Biologically, when you feel that hot flash of embarrassment, your brain wants to fixate on it to protect you from doing it again. So how does the 2-minute rule actually work in practice? Do you just set a timer?
You essentially have to outweight your own nervousness to give yourself 2 full minutes to feel the embarrassment completely.
Just sit with it.
Yes. Don't fight it. Don't tell yourself you're stupid for caring. Just feel the physical sensation. But once those 2 minutes are up, you consciously redirect your attention to a physical task.
Like what?
You pick up a tool, you write an email, you organize your desk. It trains the brain that the emotional moment has a definitive end, rather than allowing your inner camera lens to get stuck on rumination.
I love that.
And Michael also paired this with the delayed disclosure technique.
Delayed disclosure, that means resisting the urge to over-explain.
Yes.
This is so relatable. When I make a mistake, my first instinct is to send a 3-paragraph text explaining exactly why I made the mistake, what I meant to say, and how sorry I am.
And that is the spotlight effect in action. You assume they are deeply analyzing your mistake, so you feel the urgent need to provide context. The rule of delayed disclosure says, if you make a mistake, do not immediately apologize repeatedly or launch into a long explanation. Force yourself to wait a few hours.
Let the dust settle.
Exactly. In the vast majority of cases, you will realize a few hours later that the other person retained almost nothing about the moment. Your need to explain will fade entirely because you realize there is nothing to explain.
Okay, let's look at Sarah. She's 31, working in marketing. She mispronounced a word during a major client presentation and spent 3 weeks avoiding the client's calls, totally convinced the entire room was judging her competence.
Sarah is a classic example of the spotlight effect in a professional setting. And to rewire her response, she began using the audience audit.
And how do you conduct an audience audit without just overthinking more? When I'm spiraling, auditing the room sounds like giving myself more things to worry about.
Well, you ground it in hyper-specific reality. When you feel like everyone noticed your mistake, you pause and ask yourself, name 3 specific people who are actually in the room and think honestly about what they were likely focused on in that exact moment.
Right. So if I do this, I realize Bob was probably thinking about his upcoming lunch, and Janet was definitely just checking her emails under the table.
Yes. This simple, specific audit incorrupts the assumption before it hardens into a rigid belief. You systematically dismantle the massive, faceless, imaginary crowd by forcing your brain to look at real, distracted individuals.
That's brilliant. Then there's Jennifer, a 26-year-old, who tripped slightly while walking into a party. She spent the rest of the night convinced everyone saw it, and she started quietly editing her personality to look more polished and effortless.
It's so common.
She used values-based decision-making. But what does that actually mean? What does it mean to choose based on values when you're just trying to survive a social event?
It's a profound shift in how you make choices. Before making a decision that feels emotionally loaded, like what to wear, or whether to speak up with a joke, you ask yourself, what would I choose here if nobody were watching at all?
That forces you to separate your genuine preference from your performance for the imaginary audience. But that's hard to do, isn't it? Because sometimes we want to look good for other people, and that's normal.
It is normal. But decisions made predominantly from personal values, rather than imagined judgment, produce far greater long-term authenticity and lower anxiety.
Right.
Jennifer realized she was dressing and acting for an audience that wasn't looking, rather than dressing in a way that made her feel comfortable and happy. She was playing a character.
And finally, David, a 38-year-old teacher who tackled this using pure logic. He used the evidence journal.
Yes. At the end of each day, David wrote down one moment where he assumed he was being judged by his students or colleagues.
Hmm.
Then, he forced himself to write down what actual, tangible evidence he had to prove it was true.
Like hard proof.
Exactly. Did someone actually laugh? Did someone actually point it out? Did anyone pull him aside?
And I'm guessing he found zero hard evidence.
None. Over a month, his journal became a personal data set. It proved to his own brain that the spotlight was almost always smaller than it felt.
Wow.
It was far more convincing to his logical brain than any reassurances from friends could ever be, because it was his own handwriting proving the pattern.
There are a few other incredible tools in the guide, too, like the self-compassion pause, which sounds a bit, I don't know, woo-woo at first. It's just placing a hand on your heart and acknowledging that it's a hard human moment to lower the intensity of self-critical thoughts.
It sounds a bit woo-woo, but biologically, physical touch, even from yourself, releases oxytocin, which acts as a gentle brake on the panic response. It physically calms the nervous system.
And then there's deliberate small exposure. I love this one. It's like exposure therapy in miniature. It's intentionally wearing a slightly less polished outfit on a quick errand, or intentionally leaving a minor typo in an internal email just to prove to your brain that the world doesn't end.
It's building resilience by showing your brain that the consequences of being imperfect are completely mundane.
And don't forget attention redirection. Instead of worrying about what the people in the grocery store think of you, you actively shift your focus outward by asking, I wonder what they're dealing with today.
All of these steps do the same fundamental thing. They pull your attention out of that intense internal echo chamber and ground you back in reality.
So when we step back and look at all of this, what does this actually mean for the listener? We spend so much time talking about avoiding embarrassment or managing our daily anxiety. But listening to these real-life stories, Michael, Sarah, Jennifer, David's fact, it sounds like the true danger of the spotlight effect isn't just feeling awkward for a few minutes.
What do you think the danger is?
The real tragedy is that we are constantly filtering and shrinking our authentic selves.
I agree completely. The true cost of the spotlight effect is the invisible tax it places on your authenticity over a lifetime.
Yeah.
Every time you don't ask a question in a meeting, or you don't wear the clothes you actually like, or you don't speak up with an unpopular opinion, you are quietly editing your personality down to whatever feels safest under that imagined spotlight.
We're handing over the script of our own lives to an audience that isn't even paying attention.
And that is why these small daily habits matter so much. Whether it's conducting an audience audit, waiting 2 minutes before over-explaining, or limiting social media before a big event, these habits stop us from giving up our authentic choices to an imagined panel of judges.
It is so empowering to realize that your mind isn't broken when it does this. It's just biologically wired to make you the center of the universe. The spotlight is mostly an illusion, and armed with this understanding and these tools, you actually have the power to reach up and turn it off.
Think about the sheer amount of mental bandwidth you've spent over your lifetime performing for an audience that wasn't even looking. If you take all that energy back starting today, what could you actually build, create, or enjoy with it?
That is such a powerful thought to end on.
These thoughts, these questions, they don't have to stop here. Geeks Mindset has many more podcasts and videos just like this one. Subscribe to the channel and explore other episodes. They all flow the same thoughtful way. If this podcast felt genuinely useful to you, kabang, share it with even one person in your life. That one share can bring a real change in someone's life. And it helps Geeks Mindset reach more people who truly need this. If this brought you real value, look for the join button right next to the Geeks Mindset logo below this video. Click it and become a member of the Mindset Support Circle. Your support helps honest mindset awareness reach thousands who are silently struggling. Geeks Mindset moves forward because of you. Thank you so much from the heart for being here.